I need this material ready by next week. If you cannot finish it by then, you do not need to come back here. What do you mean by that? My, you are not very quick on the uptake, are you? I mean, you are fired. Her icy voice instantly froze the atmosphere in the office. As I watched my coworker freeze up at the corner of her desk, I clenched my fists without thinking. She has been doing her best to carve out a place here as a full-time employee, so why does she have to be treated so unfairly? The one looking at me for help was the woman I could never forget. She was my ex-girlfriend from high school. We had not contacted each other or even seen each other since graduation, so I never imagined we would meet again at this company. But before I even had a moment to feel any joy at our reunion, she was overwhelmed with impossible quotas, pressed harder each day. Do not take it all on by yourself. I will help you, so let me see some of your materials. She hesitantly handed over a huge stack of documents, translation data, and complicated contract paperwork. If you did it normally, it would take a month. But I went over the workflow from scratch, cutting out all the overlap and waste. I made full use of translation templates and dictionaries, set priorities, and tackled the big picture first. The task we were told to finish in 1 week suddenly looked manageable. It is all done. Before I realized it, in less than an hour, most of the key documents were finished. She had been prepared to work through the night, so she could only stare at the computer screen in shock, whispering in a trembling voice, "This cannot be real." Her eyes were filled with tears, a mix of relief and amazement. This reunion between us marked the start of a turning point in our lives. My name is Ryan. I just started as a temp at the Japan branch of an auto manufacturer called Summit Motors. Summit Motors is a major company with its headquarters overseas, and even the Japan branch is quite large. It is a so-called foreign-affiliated company with foreign executives and meetings and documents mainly in English. Of course, there are also departments focused on planning and services for the Japanese domestic market, so there are all kinds of roles under the umbrella of car businesses. I was assigned to a middle department, connecting overseas projects and domestic sales. Apparently, the work involves everything from translation and interpretation to general support duties that are more like odd jobs. Well then, Ryan, we are looking forward to working with you from today. The HR representative said this, bowing politely. I was led to the training room, where I received a simple orientation about the job. From the brightness of the room to the atmosphere of the employees coming and going, it looked like a good company at first glance. But it is not uncommon for the inside of a company to be completely different from how it looks on the outside. This is the team that handles documents and translation related to overseas business. Ryan, you will be learning your support duties under the guidance of your supervisor, Manager Catherine. As the HR rep introduced me, a woman with sharp eyes stood up from a desk in the back. Her neatly tied black hair looked smart, but there was a certain coldness in her gaze and presence. She seemed to be a mid-level manager in this department. It is nice to meet you. My name is Ryan. I bowed deeply, and Catherine gave a smile of sorts. Mike, you are young. We are very busy here, you know? From her tone, I could tell she was underestimating me from the start. The way her eyes glinted was not just my imagination. This is Melissa. If you need support with work tasks, feel free to ask her. For now, well, there are mountains of things to prep for translation, organize documents, and all sorts of odd jobs, so get to work right away. At that moment, I caught sight of the woman being introduced, and I almost gasped. Her hair brushed her shoulders, and her profile had a calm, dignified presence. She looked a bit tired, but still had a beauty that drew attention. I never thought I would see her again here. Melissa, the unforgettable ex-girlfriend I once truly loved. I am Melissa. It is nice to meet you. She gave a slight smile and bowed politely. But I could see a mix of surprise and confusion in her eyes. My own heart skipped a beat inside my chest. We had not seen each other once since graduation. And yet, now she was here in front of me as a full-time employee. Nice to meet you too. I forced a smile, trying to hide my own shock. Taking charge of the moment, Catherine clapped her hands. "All right, let's get to work," she said, as if nothing unusual had happened. The other employees, already focused on their tasks, glanced over just once and then returned to their seats. I happened to see Melissa let out a thin sigh. Her face tightened with determination as she began organizing the documents on her desk, reminding me of how she was back then. Her determination to do her best had not changed at all, perhaps. Still feeling a tangle of confusion inside me, I bowed my head slightly again. She noticed and gave a small nod in return, keeping her eyes down. And so, our reunion, mine and Melissa's, began quietly in the bustle of office life, without anyone else's congratulations. In the days that followed, as I took on support work for the overseas department, I gradually got a feel for how the company operated. What struck me was just how overwhelming the workload was in this department. There was simply no way to finish everything by quitting time. There were new tasks every single day. On top of that, every project involved time differences with other countries and detailed negotiations with clients, so it never seemed to calm down. And the one who bore the heaviest burden was Melissa. Not only did Catherine focus most of her orders on Melissa, but the other employees, wanting to prioritize their own tasks, seemed to dump extra work on her. Unlike me, a temp, Melissa had the responsibility of a full-time staff member, but even so, the amount of work she was being given was clearly too much for one person. Anyone could see how unfair the situation was. One evening, I quietly spoke to Melissa as she kept working at her desk in the corner of the office. "Are you all right? It looks like you have an enormous amount of paperwork." "I am fine, thank you," she answered, eyes cast down, but she could not hide her fatigue. As I started to ask what had happened, the sharp sound of heels approached the desk. It was Catherine. "Melissa, I am disappointed in you. I never thought you would be so slow with your work. Look, these documents have to be submitted to our overseas partners in a week. You have everything ready, right? I am sorry, I still have some translations to finish." "What? If you do not get this done in 3 days, you may have to leave." Melissa's face turned pale at Catherine's matter-of-fact declaration. Who would not be scared after being told something like that? "What do you mean? Do I really have to explain? Are you aware of your position here? If you do not want to be treated as a newcomer, prove yourself with results. Of course, if you think it is impossible, you can always choose to quit." The cold anger on Catherine's face sent a chill down my spine. Melissa bit her lip, unable to say anything in reply. I could not stand to watch any longer. Telling someone they are fired if they do not finish in 3 days, that is just beyond unacceptable. That night, Melissa was the only one left in the office, surrounded by piles of paperwork. It was obvious she was under a lot of pressure from Catherine's words. There was no one around to help her. The other desks were empty, and quitting time had long since passed. "Ryan, Noticing me rush to her desk, Melissa instinctively tried to hide her documents. It was as if she was afraid Catherine's sharp eyes could catch her at any moment. In this office, even just being seen accepting help from someone else could draw Catherine's criticism. That anxiety was written all over Melissa's gestures. "No, it's just, there's so much. I haven't made a dent in it yet. But I'm fine. Thank you." Even as she said this, she couldn't quite force a smile, and I could tell she was blinking more than usual. She was clearly pushing herself too hard. To be threatened with being fired, and yet have no one to rely on, how lonely that must feel. Unable to stand by any longer, I spoke to her just like I used to in the old days. "If you try to handle all this alone and end up collapsing, what then? You do not look all right to me. But if you help me, you might get targeted too. Do not worry about that. I am just a temp, and odd jobs are part of my work. I will manage, just give me some of the materials." When I said that, Melissa looked down with a troubled expression, but then she made up her mind and handed me a thick file. It was a mountain of contracts in English. There was still translation and organizing work to do, and even at a glance, it looked like it would take a lot of time. It will probably take days to finish everything. With a 3-day deadline, I just Melissa murmured in a voice that seemed ready to disappear. But I quickly scanned the documents, got a feel for the contents, and moved to the open space next to the copy machine to set up my laptop. Give me a moment. I am going to plan out the workflow. Ah. I could feel Melissa's confusion behind me, but first I digitized the contract text, checked for useful translation tools and the company's shared dictionaries. Next, I quickly searched for similar contract templates, compared the main provisions and numbers, cut out any unnecessary sections, and drafted a summary first, then filled in the details using the template. Doing it this way would drastically shorten the time needed. I was confident in this kind of work. I had dealt with plenty of contracts just like these before. Rather than talk, I just kept working. Soon Melissa, who at first looked anxious, began to offer help, saying, I can do this part. Before we knew it, both of us were deeply focused on our computers and the materials. We kept translating, checking, fixing typos, and moving to the next step. When I glanced at the clock, not even an hour had passed since we started. All right. With this, we have all the main points needed for the business meeting. Now I just need to format everything. I finalized the file as a PDF and checked it for consistency. Of course, there were still a few minor parts left to polish. But not only would we meet the 3-day deadline, we had finished the main structure in just one night. When I told Melissa, that's it, we are done, she slowly stopped typing and stared at the translated document on the screen. It is really finished? It feels like a dream. Her voice trembled as she spoke, still at her keyboard. It is not 100% complete yet, but not only will you meet the deadline, you should even have a cushion of extra time. If you check for typos and organize the supplemental materials from here, the manager's review will be done in no time. Melissa smiled in relief. Her eyes were glistening, as if tears of relief were welling up. Ryan, how did you get so efficient? It is amazing. She looked at me with a mix of surprise and gratitude. Well, I am just good at working smart. It is nothing special. I shrugged, trying to act casual. But, thank you. If you had not been here, I never would have managed. I really thought I would get fired. Her words carried a desperate sense of relief. To think the same Melissa who once hated to lose in high school was now driven into a corner like this. That thought brought up both anger and sadness inside me. Memories of our high school days came flooding back. Back then, people gossiped about me being poor because of my family situation. Truth be told, I really was living on the edge. Even my classmates gossiped behind my back at first, saying things like, I heard he's poor, you know. But Melissa never joined in with them. She just naturally reached out to help me. Ryan here. Do you want to copy my notes? I have them all organized, so use them if you like. That was how it all started. When she talked to me, there was never a hint of pity or, I am helping you. It was just a classmate's kindness helping each other if someone needed it. That saved me, and I was drawn to her inner strength. Melissa was always the type to work hard and never cut corners. Not just grades, but club activities, committee work, she gave her all to everything. Once she set her mind to something, she would overcome any obstacle. That determined side of her was what I fell for, little by little. With the office lights behind us, Melissa and I walked out together. The city felt chilly under the night sky, and fatigue from the long workday weighed on us. It was the kind of time when you would not be surprised to feel down after working late. But now, we walked slowly, as if savoring this long-awaited reunion. Sorry for keeping you so late tonight, Melissa said, sounding apologetic. Do not worry about it. If I could be useful as the office gopher, I am happy. The words just came out naturally. Thank you. You really saved me. There was no way I could have handled all that translation by myself. She gave a small smile as she said that. And, without meaning to, we slipped into reminiscing. High school memories. Things that happened in the classroom, after school hallway conversations, stories from club activities, and memories of being teammates. We both smiled, feeling a little shy, almost as if we had gone back to those days. "Hey Ryan, what did you do after graduating high school?" Melissa suddenly asked. Under the dim streetlights, her profile looked both hesitant and curious. "You just disappeared, and I never heard what happened after that. Honestly, I have always wondered." Her words made my chest tighten a little. When I vanished right before graduation, I am sure it must have worried her. Now, after all this time, here I am standing before her again. I wondered what she was feeling about this reunion. Well, it was because of my family. There was a lot going on, and I ended up studying the family business overseas. She blinked with a trace of sadness, but did not ask anything further. "I see. Knowing you, I am sure you did your best." I cannot really imagine what it was like. Her voice as she murmured those words carried a certain warmth. There was no hint of accusation, just a gentle tone that seemed to say, "You have been through a lot, haven't you?" "How about you, Melissa? What have you been up to since high school? I never expected to find you in the car industry." When I asked, Melissa shrugged with a shy smile and gazed at the distant neon lights. "I graduated college, looked at a few companies, but in the end, I decided I really wanted to work for an auto manufacturer. Do you remember back in high school, you said, 'Someday I want to build cars that can drive all over the world'? That stuck with me." Her answer warmed my heart in a way I did not expect. I did say something like that back then. And to think she remembered it all this time. Did I really say something so grand? "You did say that. You said that even if where you live changes, people always need a way to get around. And wouldn't it be amazing if there were cars that could take you anywhere in the world?" When I heard that, I started to think about the world, too. I had a lot of tough times at home, but thinking about the world beyond gave me courage and made me feel like new paths could open up. Her words were calm, but I could see the same passion in her eyes as she had back then. To be honest, at that time, I was scared to look forward. The tense atmosphere at home, the loneliness of feeling like no one understood me. But just hearing you say, "I'm sure we'll have a future where we can go anywhere by car," made me realize the world is so much bigger. As she spoke, Melissa narrowed her eyes, gazing off into the distance. In high school, she always smiled in front of classmates, threw herself into studies and club activities, and was always cheerful and helpful at school events. Seeing her do everything so well, everyone just assumed she had no worries at all. I had no idea what Melissa was carrying inside at first either. But one day, we ended up talking behind the school building, and she suddenly opened up about her family. She showed me a side I never saw before, quietly admitting, "No one at home really listens to me." At first, there was an awkward silence between us, but all I could do was put a hand on her shoulder and say, "I see. That must be tough." I did not know what else to say, so I just kept listening. Eventually, Melissa started to talk more about her family, bit by bit. The cold atmosphere at home, parents who always seemed to be arguing things she never showed at school. But once she put it into words, maybe Melissa found it easier to sort out her feelings. As she kept talking, she seemed to realize the confusion she had been carrying inside. At the end, she gave a shy little smile and said, "Sorry for talking about weird stuff." I think I told her, as awkwardly as I could, "Don't worry about it. You can always talk to me." I knew just how hard it was to pretend everything's fine when it really wasn't. Having to hide my own family situation and act like nothing was wrong at school. It was suffocating. That feeling was something we both shared. It's exhausting, always pretending. When I said that, Melissa looked at me in surprise, then quickly nodded. That was enough for us to understand we both carried the kind of burdens you can't explain in words. I think we both felt a little lighter inside. We could not show our true weakness to anyone. Still, we had to smile and say "I'm fine" to everyone around us. Maybe that's why we were drawn to each other so naturally back then. There were things we could communicate without ever putting them into words. Just having someone to let out all the feelings bottled up inside gave me one more reason to keep going. I remember that clearly, even now. So it didn't take long for us to start dating. Some classmates would whisper, "Why is she with that quiet guy?" But Melissa never cared. She would just smile and say, "It's fine because I like him," not caring what others thought. That made me happy and a little sorry, too. I have never forgotten how much her steady strength saved me back then. Lost in these memories, we suddenly found ourselves on the wide road in front of the station. It was the time of night when the crowds had started to thin out. Beneath the pale blue neon, Melissa and I walked side by side. Suddenly, she spoke up. "Hey Ryan, are you seeing anyone right now?" "Huh?" I almost let my voice crack in surprise at the unexpected question. Melissa glanced at me, then dropped her gaze a little. "Sorry, that was a strange thing to ask. But you know, right before graduation you broke up with me so suddenly, without really explaining. I just couldn't understand it." There was a certain, indescribable loneliness on Melissa's face as she struggled to find the right words. I almost stopped in my tracks, not knowing how to answer. Well, at the time, even if you said, "Let's break up" out of nowhere, I never really knew why. Sometimes I wonder if I did something wrong. When I turned to look, Melissa's eyes were fixed on me. In her gaze, I saw a complicated mix of anxiety and hope, as if she was silently asking for the truth about back then. "No, it's not that. It wasn't anything you did." But the words caught in my throat. If I said too much, I might just hurt her more. There was an awkward silence, and I looked away, unable to meet her eyes. "I see." I heard Melissa sigh quietly. She did not press me further, just said softly, "The station's this way," and walked ahead. I followed a few steps behind, glancing up at the sky. The moon was faintly visible above the dim streetlights. In the end, I never gave her a real answer, and we headed toward the ticket gates. Watching her buy a ticket a little distance away, I realized how dry my throat felt. If I told her the truth, there was a chance it would only create a bigger barrier between us. All I could do was grit my teeth and avoid it, like a coward. "Well, I'll see you at work tomorrow." After we parted at the station, I let out a long sigh as I went through the ticket gate. Why does my chest hurt this much? Melissa's eyes, the way she looked at me, lingered in my mind as I rode the train home through the night. The next morning, when I arrived at the office as usual, Catherine's sharp voice was already echoing across the floor. She was flipping through the stack of papers on Melissa's desk, eyeing her suspiciously and saying, "Is all of this really finished?" But in just a few minutes, I could see her brow furrow deeper. "How is this possible? I can't believe it's all done already." There was a hint of frustration in her voice. Melissa, for her part, was sitting calmly, even though she must have been nervous. Thanks to the work we did late into the night, everything important was perfectly in order, even if there were still a few details left to polish. "Amazing, Melissa. Did you really finish all this in just one night?" A few nearby coworkers expressed their amazement. Melissa, who had always been stuck with odd jobs, managed to finish all that translation and organization in such a short time. It was a shock for everyone. Melissa smiled a little and began confidently explaining her process. "Thank you, but there are actually a lot of ways to save time depending on how you approach it. Just figuring out the priorities from the start helps you avoid redundant work." She was clearly making use of the efficiency methods we had reviewed together the day before. She had taken it in and was now speaking about it in her own words, with confidence. The other employees were openly impressed, and even Catherine was at a loss for words. "Well then, but next, you'll need to take care of these for me." After a brief, tense silence, Catherine tried to act unbothered and dumped another stack of paperwork onto Melissa's desk. It looked like detailed accounting documents. Just seeing them was enough to give anyone a headache. "These are the project expenses. I'll need you to organize and submit them by next week. Understood?" I watched to see if Melissa would be rattled by the challenge in front of so many coworkers. But she just glanced through the files, then smiled confidently. "Understood. If I consolidate the data and sort out the unnecessary parts first, I should be able to get started right away. Thank you. I'll handle it." With that, she immediately started up her computer and got to work. Yesterday she seemed so crushed, but today she looked like a different person, reliable and strong. From a distance, I watched her and could not help but smile a little. It seemed she was putting those new methods to good use. Look at her, Melissa. She was always the one stuck with menial work, but this is amazing, isn't it? I began to hear whispers like that from people around us. The employees passing by Melissa's desk seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere immediately. Even those who had treated her poorly looked a little uncomfortable now. Then, a few days later, something unexpected happened. Catherine's boss, the section manager, Andrew, gathered a few employees and made an announcement. We have received a new project inquiry from a major client. We need someone who can handle English and prepare documents properly. I am thinking of appointing Melissa as the lead for this. Andrew brought this up at an important meeting dealing with one of the company's largest overseas projects. The major client everyone was talking about was Gardner International, a huge foreign-affiliated trading company. They deal in automotive parts, equipment, and technology all over the world, and in recent years, they have been putting serious effort into developing new technologies through business partnerships. Summit Motors had done business with them regularly before, but this new project was on a much larger scale and had become a focal point inside the company. The reason? Gardner International has connections with auto manufacturers around the globe, and there was a possibility of launching a major new electric vehicle project. If the partnership with this company were to deepen and even lead to a joint project, it would be a tremendous business opportunity for Summit Motors' Japanese branch. That's why this client is extremely discerning. Not only do we need English skills, but they are strict about the quality of strategic documents and presentations, and the pace of their discussions is fast. We need someone who can handle all of that, but honestly, we do not have many people with that skill set. We really want to succeed with this project. So, Melissa was the one we thought of. Apparently, after watching her recent performance, management judged that she could handle the responsibility. Not only was she handling English translation, but she managed paperwork and communication on the ground effortlessly, and above all, she was enthusiastic. Promoting a younger employee is good for the organization too, as it helps develop talent. But just so you know, this will put a lot of pressure on you. They work with the world's top partner companies, and I have heard they will not hesitate to walk away at the slightest problem. Please be prepared for that. The implication was clear. If you cannot deliver results, there will be serious consequences, but that was only because Gardner International was such an important client. Failure was not an option. But if she succeeded, it would be a major breakthrough. The office buzzed with excitement at the announcement. Some people were surprised. Melissa? Really? While others voiced their support, saying, if anyone can do it, she can. Either way, it was an extraordinary leap for someone who had always been treated as a newcomer to be put on such a major account. Please let me do it. Sitting at the table in the meeting room, with all eyes on her, Melissa said this clearly and decisively. She took a deep breath and looked straight at Andrew. My English may not be perfect yet, and I still have a lot to learn about preparing materials. But if I do not take on this challenge now, I might never get another chance. So, please let me do it. I promise I will make it a success. Her passionate voice rang out in the otherwise quiet office. Those who remembered how she used to be stuck with menial tasks were especially moved by the strength of her resolve. Normally, I would assign this to someone more experienced, but Melissa has been producing results day after day, and more than anything, she has the right energy. All right, I will make sure management knows. Once you are formally appointed, we will discuss the details and schedule. At those words, Melissa bowed deeply. I could feel both excitement and nerves radiating from her hands nearly trembling. But there was no hesitation in her eyes. Raising her head, she said a quiet but determined, "Thank you." Catherine looked like she had bitten into something sour, but she could not object to Andrew's recommendation. Later that day, as the workday was winding down, Melissa came over to my desk. "Ryan, thank you so much. It is all thanks to the methods you taught me." She gave a shy smile as she said this. "No, I just helped a little. The results are all because you learned and worked hard. Still, I am really grateful. I feel like I can finally look forward now. I could hear the determination in her quiet voice, and it made my chest feel tight with emotion. The next few weeks were intense. In preparation for the Gardner International contract, Melissa worked nonstop. In addition to her regular duties, she was now handling English emails and online meetings with the client. I supported her from the background, helping her organize the massive amount of information. But recently, Melissa had started to show so much confidence that she hardly needed my help anymore. All the menial tasks Catherine used to push on her had actually given her a solid foundation. Of course, it was unlikely Catherine was happy about that. And then the day of the contract negotiations finally arrived. Even though it was still early in the morning, there was a strange tension hanging in the air. After all, Gardner International's team was about to arrive, and everyone was on edge. When Melissa was heading to the conference room with her materials, I caught her in the hallway. "Hey, Melissa, are you okay?" "Yes. Thanks to your help, the documents are all set. I will do my best." She managed a slightly stiff smile as she said this. I noticed the faint shadows under her eyes, but now was not the time to worry her more. She needed encouragement, not warnings. "I cannot join the meeting, but I will be close by. When it is all over, let's have a little celebration. You have worked unbelievably hard. Let's make today a win and really relax afterward." "Yes, you're right. Thank you, Ryan." She hugged the documents to her chest and nodded, then walked through the conference room door. No matter how well you prepare, it is impossible not to feel nervous at a moment like this. But I believed that Melissa would get through it. Before long, the representatives from Gardner International who had come from overseas were shown into the conference room. There were several people in their group, and someone who appeared to be an interpreter accompanied them. Some of the company's higher-ups were present, with Catherine at the center, projecting confidence. Melissa sat beside her, ready to present documents when needed. The meeting started smoothly. Both sides reviewed the materials they had coordinated in advance, confirming the anticipated risks and delivery schedules. The Gardner team nodded with smiles, and through the interpreter, expressed that everything seemed to be in order. The tense atmosphere in the office seemed to melt away. But then, trouble struck. Negotiations had seemed smooth, but one of Gardner's leaders suddenly looked concerned and spoke up. "By the way, regarding these additional specifications, from your materials, it appears that there is no risk analysis covering the assembly line modifications or new battery testing at the local plant. I believe we asked you in advance to estimate the plant downtime during renovations and research the procedures for working with external suppliers. What is the status of that?" The room instantly tensed. Catherine hurriedly checked with the interpreter, her face clouding, but she nodded as if this was all expected. "Of course, we have looked into it. Right, Melissa? You were supposed to handle this. From the assembly line layout changes to verifying operations with the new robots and coordinating delivery dates with suppliers, I made it clear that you needed to gather all this information and do a risk analysis. Didn't I?" She glanced at Melissa, who at first looked confused and then quickly bowed her head in panic. "Sorry? I was never told about that. I do not remember being given that task." Melissa chose her words carefully, but Catherine's expression turned dark as she leaned forward. "What do you mean? I told you to include everything from how assembly line downtime would impact our sales targets to estimating the costs and risks of bringing in the new battery from external suppliers. Are you saying you did not hear that? What do you think your job is?" Catherine glared at Melissa with sharp, cold eyes. To any outsider, it looked as if an incompetent subordinate had dropped the ball on a critical assignment. "I am sorry. I will look into it right away. But I was not told the scope was this wide." "You will look into it now? Do you have any idea how important this meeting is?" "Taking your time like this is disrespectful to the client." Catherine's open anger left Melissa with no choice but to bow her head. The Gardner team looked confused, and one of them asked in English, "Should we pause the contract negotiations for now?" making the situation even more awkward. Catherine, trying to cover her own mistake, dramatically shrugged and turned to the clients. I apologize for my subordinate's shortcomings. I will personally handle this issue. Could we proceed with the other items in the meantime? The clients exchanged a glance, then nodded through the interpreter. Understood. In the tense atmosphere, Catherine shot a cold glance at Melissa and snapped. That's enough. You are just in the way here. Please leave the room. I will handle things by myself. But it is fine. Just go. You are slowing us down. With that, Melissa was treated like a burden and sent out of the conference room. Melissa walked slowly to a corner of the office, picked up the files at her desk, and tried to flip through the pages with trembling fingers. I could not just stand by and watch, so I gently spoke to her. Melissa, what happened? Are you okay? When she looked at me, there were tears welling up in her eyes. Her cheeks were tinged red, a sign of her shame and helplessness. Ryan, I really didn't know. I never heard a word about that risk analysis, but she yelled at me in front of everyone, like I was some useless subordinate. I opened her files and checked Catherine's instructions. Sure enough, there was not a single note or memo about the scope of the risk analysis. It seemed likely that Catherine had deliberately left it out, or just failed to explain it properly. It looks to me like Catherine did this on purpose to dump the blame on you. When I said that, Melissa bit her lip and choked back her voice. No way. The frustration was almost too much to bear. It's terrible. If she does not like me, she could just make my life difficult. But to do this during such an important negotiation. Melissa's voice trembled, unable to hide her frustration. Ever since high school, she had dreamed of building cars with her own hands and connecting with the world. She had worked so hard. Only to be trampled on like this, it was just too cruel. I gently placed my hand on Melissa's shoulder and crouched slightly so I could meet her eyes. I will take care of this. If you back down here, it would all be for nothing. All your hard work would go to waste. But I do not know what she might do next. If you step in, you could be the one in trouble this time. Melissa bit her lip, honestly afraid. But nothing would change if I ran away now. I gave her shoulder a reassuring pat. It will be fine. I am sure it will work out. Don't worry about me. More importantly, book us a place for that celebration party. We need to really let off some steam. Melissa, still with tears in her eyes, managed a faint smile. Okay, I will, but don't push yourself too hard. Promise me. I nodded to reassure her, then picked up the documents and headed for the conference room. Standing in front of the door, I took a deep breath before stepping inside. Excuse me. It was not a very large room, but inside were executives and foreign clients lined up, a tense air hanging over everything. At the center of it all was Catherine, glaring at me sharply. This is an important negotiation. A temp like you does not belong here. Leave right now. Of course, it was Catherine's sharp voice that rang out. At the far end of the table, Gardner International's foreign executive sat, discussing things through an interpreter. I apologize, but may I have a moment of your time? There's something I must say. I bowed my head and spoke carefully, but Catherine's expression hardened. Something you must say? I am not interested. Can you not read the room? If you do not leave, I will fire you. It is easy to end a temp contract like yours. At that, one of the foreign representatives started to say something in English. The interpreter hesitated, but before they could finish, the highest-ranking person on the Gardner side spoke up in a low voice. Excuse me, did you just say you were going to fire him? A chill ran through the room. The sharp gaze was now focused on Catherine. She forced a smile and replied, Oh no, please don't worry. Sorry about that. This temp employee barged in uninvited. I will have him leave at once, so let's continue. But the Gardner executive raised his hand to halt her, signaling the interpreter. No, I cannot overlook this. Are you really planning to fire him? You know who he is? He is Ryan, the son of the president of the German headquarters, correct? The atmosphere in the room changed in an instant. It was as if time had stopped. Several of the Gardner team nodded quietly, as if they already knew me. No way. Catherine's face went completely pale. She was speechless, her lips trembling with confusion. I stood straight in the center of the table and bowed deeply. I have no intention of using my position as the president's son to act self-important. I wanted to experience the Japan branch for myself, so I worked here as a temp. I apologize for not disclosing this. The Gardner executives exchanged glances. It seemed they were aware of my presence from the start. Through the interpreter, they replied, "We heard about you from our headquarters in Germany. We were told you might be visiting Japan discreetly, but we certainly did not expect to meet you here." Catherine stood up from her chair in a daze, opening and closing her mouth, unable to speak. And for good reason. She had just loudly declared she would fire a subordinate who turned out to be the president's son. I thought he was just a temp. No one told me. Catherine tried to excuse herself in a shaky voice, but the Gardner team just looked at her, half exasperated. The senior staff from our own company were also frozen in place. I took a breath and continued. As for the missing risk analysis data from earlier, I will take responsibility and prepare it myself. I am in a position to request the latest project reports and updates directly from the German headquarters, and using those resources, I can quickly gather detailed information on external suppliers and the assembly line modifications. By combining that with the domestic data Melissa has been managing, we can cover what was missing and provide an even more accurate risk analysis. Please give us a little more time to prepare the documents for the next meeting. As I spoke, I gently placed the file I had brought on the table. Inside were the materials Melissa had worked so hard to prepare, along with the draft data I had helped compile. Thank you for your honesty. I look forward to reviewing your analysis. The Gardner executive smiled calmly, taking the file and replying through the interpreter. Meanwhile, Catherine looked completely cornered, her eyes darting around as if searching for something to say. I glanced at her and continued calmly. It is true that Melissa worked very hard as the project lead. If there were any shortcomings, I believe the manager who failed to give clear instructions is also responsible. Please do not diminish the value of her work. A tense silence filled the room. Hearing the translated conversation, even the executives who had acted so important earlier now exchanged nervous glances. Catherine could do nothing but hang her head. After a pause, the Gardner executive spoke again. "We trust in your abilities. As long as you can provide the missing data, we are willing to continue these negotiations. Can we schedule another meeting soon?" A collective sigh of relief went up from the company's senior staff. It seemed the client was not going to call off the deal just yet. "Thank you. I will have the data ready before our next meeting." I bowed deeply, feeling the tension melt away. However, only Catherine, standing off to the side, remained pale and dazed, lost in thought. At this point, she was facing more than just the possibility of terminating a temp contract. Her own position at the company might now be at risk. That sense of looming danger was clearly visible on her face. The chaotic meeting ended with an agreement to prepare for the next round. The Gardner executive said, "We will excuse ourselves for today," and left quietly. Once they were gone, the managers shot bitter looks at Catherine, but, feeling awkward, dispersed without a word. Before long, only Catherine and I were left in the conference room. She bit her dry lips and glared at me with resentment. "What is the meaning of this? If you had that kind of position, why did you not say so from the start? Did you set me up?" Her voice shook, but I only shook my head. "I never meant to set you up. I just wanted to work here like everyone else. But the truth is, you trampled on Melissa's hard work, and you also threatened to fire me." Catherine fell silent, eyes dropping to the floor. Without another word, I left the room. From behind the closed door, I could hear her exhale sharply. Out in the hallway, I found Melissa standing a little distance away. She still seemed to be in disbelief, but when she saw me, she called out cautiously, "Ryan, was all that really?" Yeah, apparently the client knew who I was. Even I found it hard to believe, but there was no point in hiding it now. Melissa blinked in surprise, then gave a small smile. So you really are amazing, Ryan. It's not that I'm amazing. I just wanted to understand how this company really works. That was the truth. I came back to Japan to learn more about this company. My father is the president of Summit Motors, so I have always been treated like a minor celebrity. My father is German, my mother Japanese. So as a mixed-race kid, I grew up under constant scrutiny. Wherever I went, people whispered, "That's the president's son," or "He's the heir to that big company." I never asked for that. Anytime I did anything remotely out of the ordinary, it caused a stir, and I hardly had any privacy. Through all that, my mother was my only real ally. I think she could tell I was close to my limit mentally. Why not try going to high school in Japan? If you live somewhere else for a while, maybe you'll finally feel free. Her words were full of kindness, trying to look out for me. At first, my father was reluctant, but he allowed me to go to Japan on the condition that I would return after graduating high school. So I was able to spend those 3 years just as a regular student in Japan. Looking back, it felt like the first real freedom I had ever experienced. By using my mother's maiden name, no one treated me as the president's son. Whatever I did, people saw me first and foremost as just Ren. That kind of normality felt completely new to me. Honestly, I had no intention of starting a relationship back then. I knew I would have to return to Germany eventually, and if I got too close to anyone, it would only make things harder when it was time to say goodbye. But I couldn't help being drawn to Melissa. Maybe it was because we shared similar loneliness and obstacles. We just naturally got close, and she became more precious to me than anyone else. But when graduation came, I had no choice but to leave her behind. I still remember the look on Melissa's face when I broke up with her. I understood my position all too well. I had to go back to Germany. So, back then, I had to walk away, even though it hurt. And now, after talking things over with my father at the German headquarters, I was sent undercover as a temp at the Japan branch. Apparently, there was a department here with an unusually high turnover, not quite a black company, but definitely a problem. Paper reports and interviews weren't enough to get to the heart of the issue, so my father and the higher-ups suggested I go in and investigate myself. To be honest, I never thought I would come back to Japan like this. But there are so many things you can't understand without seeing them for yourself. You can't figure out why people are leaving just by looking at surface-level reports. That's why I kept my identity as the president's son secret and worked as an ordinary temp. With all that history behind me, meeting Melissa again here felt like fate's doing. After the way we abruptly parted back then, I never thought we would meet again, especially not as colleagues. But now that my true identity had been exposed, I had to report the situation to upper management immediately. Soon, I was called in for an emergency meeting with the company's executives. I told Melissa, "We'll talk more later," then parted ways with her for the time being and made my way to the solemn conference room. The meeting included several Summit Motors Japan executives and, of course, Catherine. It felt as if every problem I'd seen during my investigation was bubbling up at once. The executives turned to me, asking pointed questions about Catherine's attitude toward her subordinates and the suspiciously high turnover rate. "Catherine, what exactly were you doing? We've heard from employees that you repeatedly gave unreasonable orders, were unclear with your instructions, and pushed responsibility onto your subordinates." When one of the executives pressed her, Catherine pressed her lips together and couldn't answer for a while. But when the silence dragged on and everyone started to get impatient, she finally let out a shallow breath and spoke. "I was just doing my best. I thought if I didn't deliver results, I would be let go. Ever since I started working, I felt just how hard it is for women in the workplace. Every time I made a mistake, I'd hear people say, 'See, women can't do the job,' behind my back. It was humiliating. I just didn't want to be looked down on anymore, so I pushed myself harder and harder." The unexpected confession caused a ripple of discomfort in the room. Catherine lifted her gaze, continuing with a look of regret. "But that doesn't excuse what I did. It's true that every time I felt cornered, I ended up sacrificing my team. I know I did some things that bordered on harassment, but I just didn't know any other way. I thought the only way to survive was to push others down. Her voice trembled. Some might see that as nothing but an excuse, but the sense of desperation in her words was clear to everyone. Even so, I'm sorry, but we can't keep you at this company any longer. One of the executives delivered the final verdict. Catherine nodded with a twisted expression, unable to say another word in her defense. Understood. Shouldering the blame, she bowed her head slightly, staring at the floor. And so Catherine's dismissal was officially decided. The meeting ended quickly, and soon the day came for her to leave the company. When she finished her paperwork and walked to the entrance, no one came to see her off. Normally, at least someone would say goodbye to a departing employee, but Catherine's negative reputation was so overwhelming that everyone avoided her. Yet, as she hurried toward the exit, one person stood in her way: Melissa. Melissa quickly moved to block her path, bowing her head slightly. Thank you for everything, Catherine. Catherine frowned in confusion at the unexpected words. Thank me? I thought you hated me. Melissa lowered her gaze, letting out a small breath. Even from a distance, I could see a kind of resolve in her eyes. Yes, honestly, I really did hate you. I was pushed to the brink every day, always being threatened with being fired. I almost cried so many times. But it's also true that I learned a lot by hanging on and working hard through all of it. So, thank you. Catherine's shoulders trembled at Melissa's words. She looked surprised, but then managed a slight, bitter smile. You really are kind of ridiculously honest, or maybe just naive, to be able to say that. Melissa bit her lip and bowed her head again. Catherine watched her for a moment, then let out a breath, her shoulders relaxing just a little. But you are strong. Stronger than I am, at least. No matter what happened, you never ran away. I must have made you suffer so much. With that, she gave Melissa the slightest of bows. And then, with an expression that mixed regret and just a hint of relief, she managed a weak smile. I'll start over from scratch. I'll look at where I went wrong, and maybe, someday. Her voice trailed off. Maybe she thought it was already too late for her. But there's always a chance for someone to truly change. Without another word, Catherine walked past Melissa, pushed open the heavy door, and stepped out into the world. Her silhouette looked lonely, but in a way peaceful. Melissa. I came closer, and she turned and smiled a little. You know, Ryan, I was so angry at her so many times, but I wanted to say goodbye properly in the end. It might sound strange, but I really did become stronger because of her strictness. When Melissa said that, her gentle smile made something warm well up inside me. But as she went on, her voice trembled a little, as if she was uncertain. And there's something else I wanted to tell you. I mean, I do love cars, but the reason I chose this industry is also because I hope that maybe I'd see you again someday. My heart skipped a beat. I never imagined she'd felt that way. Melissa averted her eyes shyly, her lips pressed together as she tried to steady her breath. Hearing who you really are honestly shocked me. I know I might not be good enough for you, but I don't want to regret not saying how I feel. Even if you have to go back to Germany someday, I want you to remember how I feel. Looking into her sincere eyes, I nearly wanted to pull her into a hug. But just then, Ryan! Suddenly, my father's voice rang out behind me. I turned to see him in a suit, walking confidently down the hall toward us. The sight made my heart leap. When did he get to Japan? Dad, what are you doing here? I heard the report. I see you've taken care of the issues at the Japan branch. That's my son. I was worried when you insisted on studying in Japan back in high school, but seeing what you've accomplished, I guess it really does run in the blood. He spoke with pride, but his gaze shifted naturally to Melissa beside me. Melissa bowed, nervous, and quietly said, Nice to meet you. My father narrowed his eyes. Ryan, who is this young lady beside you? Ah, she's an employee here. Her name is Melissa. Melissa hurried to introduce herself, and my father raised an eyebrow, but a small, amused smile played at his lips. I saw the two of you talking earlier. You seemed quite close. Is there something I should know, Ryan? His voice was low, but carried a hint of laughter, making me hesitate for a second before I answered. Dad, actually, I want to help rebuild the Japan branch a bit more. We fixed the turnover problem, but there's still a lot to be done on the ground. So, I'd like to stay in Japan for a while longer. And, Melissa is important to me. My father's expression shifted slightly, but I kept going. I love her. If possible, I want to stay in Japan and spend my life with her. When I glanced to the side, I saw Melissa's eyes wide, as if she might burst into tears at any moment. Then, nervously, she turned toward my father. I know I still have a lot to learn, but I want to do everything I can to help Ryan make this Japan branch a better place. So, please, let me support him. She bowed deeply, and my father looked a little surprised. Then, as if remembering something, he murmured, "Oh, right. That reminds me the Gardner executives kept talking about an outstanding woman who put together excellent documents. I believe her name was Melissa? That must have been you." Melissa, embarrassed, answered, "Yes, I think so." My father nodded meaningfully and turned to look at me. "I see. Ryan, maybe having someone like her by your side is what brings out the best in you. All right. I'll leave the rebuilding of the Japan branch to you. Just make sure you stay in close contact with headquarters in Germany. We have some important projects there too." At those words, I breathed a sigh of relief. Then my father turned to Melissa again. "Please take care of Ryan. He tends to take on too much by himself. I have not seen him look this full of life in a long time." "Oh, yes, sir. Thank you, Dad." I nodded firmly as I replied, and Melissa looked up at me with eyes bright with tears. Our hands found each other naturally, and the distance between us seemed to shrink just a little. A surge of determination and irrepressible happiness. Both emotions burned warmly in my chest at the same time. In the months that followed, the Japan branch underwent a dramatic transformation, and sales began to grow steadily. What once had been a place plagued by high turnover was now focused on building an environment where each employee could find meaning in their work. There were still plenty of challenges, but every day I felt a growing sense of accomplishment. My relationship with Melissa deepened even more from the moment we joined hands that day. Even when our work kept us busy and apart, we always supported each other, and on days off we would relax together at a cafe in the next town. Those simple moments had become precious treasures in my life. Just as my father had said, I realized I really do have a tendency to shoulder too much on my own, brooding in silence, unable to show weakness. But Melissa accepted all of that, and my colleagues at work began to share their struggles too. Somewhere along the way, I learned that showing your weaknesses is not shameful at all. It is actually necessary in order to help and support others. And so, living every day with her by my side, I am slowly building a new future. Something I once almost lost. The simple act of sharing and supporting one another has become more precious and irreplaceable than I ever imagined. That is why I want to keep reaching out without hiding who I am. No matter how tough things get or how happy the moments, as long as we can share them with someone else, there is nowhere we cannot go. With that certainty in my heart, I intend to keep building a future together with Melissa and with this company day by day.